Hello, everyone out there. This is another segment of the Synth Society Summit. Thank you for joining us. I am Travarsi, one of your moderators, and I have Sean Kruda. Next, we have, I can't see what, Saddle Up the Robots.
Hi, Jonathan, Saddle Up the Robots.
New York, right?
From New York, that's right.
All right. And next we have Trevor.
Hi, yeah, I'm Trevor in Los Angeles. I work at Perfect Circuit and also play some live modular and other stuff as well, occasionally.
And we have Dissonant.
Hey, I'm Jason Dissonant, one of the founders of New York Modular Society, and not going to answer that call.
And next over we have Ed. Hey Ed, how you doing?
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah. So yeah, my name's Ed Guild. I am circuit happy, electronic manufacturer. Oh, hold on, I have a little visitor here. Come here, quick. My boy just wanted to say goodnight to me. This is Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Everyone says hi.
And then we have Rhythm Droid with us.
Hey everyone, I'm Rhythm Droid. I live in Los Angeles. I perform all live hardware electronic music, generally on the funky side. I'm very happy to be here. I do apologize. This is the first time I'm using a new computer, and it might possibly have a very damaged internal system. So unfortunately, it's only audio today.
Who was on the phone?
I'm sorry?
I said, who was on the phone?
Oh,
That was my mother calling.
With that, like, this is a example of talking about live performance and Synths and Eurorack, and here we just want to talk about some of the trials and tribulations that we've had to deal with, some of the ways that we work within those parameters, and how we kind of just roll, like, how we set up our live performance, and meaning from connecting and making sure everything is syncing. And what are some of the things that we deal with when it doesn't work, and some of the approaches of how we make that plan A, plan B, plan C sometimes, and what we need to do to kind of basically, because the show must go on, So, all right, let's get into it. Devon, where would you start with that one?
Oh gosh, well, I've been performing live with hardware for 20 years, and I would say the most common mistake I see with, the most common thing I would say is a mistake with folks live performing nowadays is not preparing ahead of time and not knowing all the pitfalls. And many of them can only be discovered through live performance, but hopefully today we can talk about some of the ways you can prepare. I mean, there's just it's an entire book full of things that you got to do to prepare, from packing extra cables, making sure that you can set your gear up on whatever surface is there, talk to the event coordinator ahead of time to make sure they've got a surface for you, talking about what kind of outputs you're going to use. I mean, I don't know where to start.
Well, let's just talk about, picking the gear that you would take on the road for live performance with you. I'm sure
that's a great place to start. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's no point in bringing out gear that you're not going to do something with live. Otherwise, it's just, otherwise it's just weighing you down both physically to bring it out to a gig, and mentally to try and actually coordinate, to make sure that nothing goes wrong with it. So basically have as minimal of a setup as you can while still making it interesting for your audience and fun for you. I remember early days, I thought it looked really cool to have a huge triple level keyboard stand full of stuff. And, now we have the luxury of picking and choosing exactly what we want to take. So for my current, for my most recent live performances, to be specific, I have one synthesizer, one drum machine, and one sequencer, but they're pretty versatile machines. So the synthesizer is the Electron Digitone keys, which is a 4-part multi-timbral, so I can have 4 separate instruments going on at the same time, which really allows me to get some textural variation and things that are a little bit more quote-unquote song-like. So that's the synthesizer. And then the drum machine is a sampling drum machine. It's the surprise Electron Analog Rhythm Mark II. So between the two of those, they cover a huge palette of sounds for me. It's basically FM synthesis on the tonic side, and then on the rhythmic side, it's samples and analog drum synthesis. And then the third and final piece of gear is the Pioneer Tori's Squid, which is a MIDI sequencer, which I can use to control the Digitone keys or the Analog Rhythm Mark II. And then if I wanted to add from there, I would only just add some stereo sound processing. So if I wanted to bring out any more gear, I would say, okay, the next thing that I want is just something to beef up the sound and to create more texture. Then I would feel like it's a really complete setup. So for example, like an Oto Boom analog warming unit, or an Oto Biscuit bit crusher / analog filter.
Okay. And now I know that, for example, I know Jonathan and Jason, or Saddle Up the Robots and Dissonant, you perform, but I believe one of you mentioned that you have very different approaches to your live performance. And so I want to kind of touch on that. Just
Sure. Yeah, we're both part of the New York Modular Society, so we end up playing a lot of the same shows together. And I would suggest we have very, very unique kind of frames of mind when it comes to live performance. So first off, Saddle Up the Robots is a band. It's a 2-piece modular synth duo. And that comes with its own challenges and pitfalls, I would suggest. I can't tell you how much and how often we have clock issues between the two of us, and sync issue. It's just the worst. But putting on top of that, all that, try to getting the systems integrated at the same time, we really like to actually play a lot, like in terms of like in the moment and performance oriented. I have makeshift DIY drums that I'll bang on. We use keytars at our last show. The other half of our group is a very accomplished pianist, so we try to really like put a lot of energy in our performances. Jason, why don't you talk about your approach?
Yeah. So I started performing probably about 4 years ago after a 15, 20-year hiatus, I got into modular and I just felt like I wanted to do something with it. And I learned real quickly, like Patrick was saying, I just learned real quickly that the most minimal setup is the best. My first show, I found myself, I had a BeatStep Pro as a sequencer, and I had 2 modular cases, and I got there and I had to cross patch a ton of things. And once I finally got things set up, which took a while, I couldn't see anything. So honestly, that was my biggest thing I've learned, is buy a small USB lamp, maybe get some Velcro and attach that sucker to your case, because I couldn't see a damn thing. So yeah, since then it's been about creating as minimal a setup as I can. I actually have everything in a 12U Eurorack case, but sometimes use one of the 4MS pods with a Bitbox or the 1010 Music synth box for pads, actually, for chords. It's like the smallest polyphonic synthesizer that you can buy, and integrates with modular, so really easily. So, yeah, we're totally opposite. Maximal and minimalist. So,
But we both own that USB lamp.
we do.
That was a good tip.
One of the questions in the chat is like from Patrick POV Energy here. Yeah, the one thing I forget to plan for all the time is lighting, especially if you stream live. Any recommendations? So definitely a lamp for sure.
Yeah.
These things behind me, those make it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have this module, and I can drop it in the link drop it in the chat later, but it actually has like two USB ports, and it is just for lamp lighting, and that's really been helpful.
Yeah. My new case, which I've gone through a lot of different cases for live performance, and I was on the waiting list for this thing for 2 years, is the Amalgamod 12U from Australia. And it actually has USB ports built in. And if you ask him, it costs a couple extra bucks, you can get USB lamps with it. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
I think that one of my experiences when you were talking about lighting, I've had the opposite experience where I've had the controller like using like a push or something, and then outside, and then you realize how you just can't see any lighting, and any of the lights on the square.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen to like even Space Racer. She was performing using the circuit with her modular, and she was like she couldn't see the color of any of the colors on the pads, and so that's like another thing that could be just thought ahead about, like especially when you're playing in outside environment, depending on the time of day and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. In New York, we don't get a chance to play outside as much as y'all do, but we'd like to. We got a few places we can do that.
Nice. You guys get good weather out there in the summer too. Like fall, like this nice sweet spot. It's pretty.
Extremes. It gets really muggy and gross. It's not fun to play at that either.
So one of the topics then, and it's actually a question in the chat, is here. I'm going to pop it up for everyone to see here. When playing live, how do you balance prepared material versus improvisation? Rhythm Droid, do you want to kind of kick us off on that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, when I'm preparing to perform live, I just build in certain sections of my songs where I know I'm going to improvise, and I set up my equipment to be ready for that. So for example, on the Digitone keys, it's like I have 4 different layers or 4 different tracks available, and sometimes there's no sequence data on track 4, but it's just a patch that's loaded up, ready for me to improvise on. So I just try and have something ready, like a patch already loaded that I can improvise on. Or maybe on the analog rhythm, maybe a drum kit that's already loaded. But what I do is I constrain the improvisation. I sort of sandwich it between a part of the song that's already kind of like I know what I'm doing, and then at the end of the improvisation, I know how to get back to where I was. So it's just the sandwich method, I suppose.
And Jonathan, you want to, or Saddle Up the Robots, you want to touch on that a little bit? I love your artist name, by the way. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I would suggest that, I don't know, I use tools to kind of bring out the improvisational aspects for our show. So there's a fair amount of over-preparedness that goes into you have to when you're a band. We spend 45 minutes before each one of our sets getting ready, double checking, triple checking, again, syncing up the 2 systems. Like there's no shortage of setup time that we require. So from an improvisational aspect, we either just rely on, again, the performance aspects, so the instruments themselves, and just kind of our intuition, or we have systems for kind of creating windows of opportunity for improvisation. So we have breaks in the song, or we use random a lot. I'm a big fan of mutable instruments, marbles, and a couple other of like controlled random tools that I have in all my live cases, because I feel like that gives you a good opportunity to kind of bring out some unique flair and something that you wouldn't normally get if it felt like a very tightly, I don't know, controlled track. So that's my trick for improvisation is don't really improvise and let tools do it for you, I guess. Does that count? Probably not.
I think it sort of counts. Yeah. Like, I mean,
cheating is my answer.
What about you, Jason?
Kind of bit of the sandwich method, actually. I think we'll just keep calling it that. I definitely create a bunch of prepared stuff, and I don't show up unpatched. There's just, I don't know, people who do that, I'm always blown away by their skill level. To show up to a show completely unpatched and put something together in a matter of minutes is just, it's mind-blowing to me. But my system's a little larger, and there's no way I can do it. So I have voices in the system, and I have sequences, and then it's really a matter of just giving myself some space to arrange those sequences the way that I want to. I might choose a different arrangement based on how I'm feeling or how the crowd is feeling. And also leave a little space in there. There's always, no matter what, there's always an improvisational aspect, because nothing is 100% rehearsed. Like, I might do a filter sweep at a different time. To be honest, one of my secret weapons is a discontinued noise engineering module, the Confundo Funkitis. And that thing is really all about improvisation. So it's you've got basically two sequences that can go into this one module, and you can flip between them sort of DJ fader style. And it's phenomenal. It's just so much fun to play with. But yeah, it's a bit of both. Yeah.
I would bet everyone on here has a secret weapon module for that controlled improvisation that we're talking about here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sean, did you want to?
Yeah, I've definitely been part of that. When I first was starting to play out live, I was like, oh, it's called live. So, years back, I was like, oh, I should show up with nothing prepared and just play live. And I found out really quickly that people don't want to see you just start sequencing kick drums and just come up with bass lines. And it was just, I put a lot of pressure on myself. I was like, oh, so now I realize you do have to have some prepared material and improvise in between that. Like you're talking about the sandwich, definitely I feel is the best way to go, rather for myself anyway.
Yeah.
There's a dude who plays our shows in New York. His name is Modular Moose, and he just shows up with a 9U system, completely unpatched, just kind of plops it down on the table and just starts going.
It's amazing.
It's totally awe-inspiring, and it's like hypnotic, and at the same time, like it terrifies. I have nightmares for him. I can't even imagine. He pulls it off.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you are picking like module wise, a lot of the newer modules are very like compact and like very small interfaces. And so I think a lot of people overlook some of the older modules that have like more spaced out like knob layouts, and especially like sequencers that are really simple, like something like the Metropolis, or just like a really simple 8-step sequencer where like each step has its own knob. because something like that will let you improvise a lot more if you're doing like simple techno loops where you want it to be a little bit different every time around. Where if you're using a more complex sequencer where everything has to be programmed in, it's not gonna be changing that much, where you can grab a few of the knobs and just keep tweaking every time it's going around in the loop. So I think those like compact modules are great for when you want a lot of functionality in a small amount of HP, but consider the more spread out modules as well, just because they're more interactive.
Yeah, give yourself physical space too. You need mental space and also physical. I think that's a really, really good point.
Space just makes sense. And it's one of the reasons why I try to keep it all inside one machine, is because it allows me to show up. The only thing I really have to worry about is tuning. And it gives my brain a lot of space. I'm not as freaked out. I'm not as worried. Is this going to go right? Is that going to go wrong? I totally agree. Having that space is an amazing thing.
That's a great point.
Yes, I agree. One of the times when I first actually started playing live, I played in this group called Forward, and it was predominantly like what Jonathan was saying. It was very like, we had a lot of stuff, so it was a lot. I brought a lot of stuff to manage. I had a push, I had a rhythm, but it was all, but then the other side of it was I played with my partner at the time, Brian Markman, and he did like the keys, and then I did all the percussive and effects, but we started with a blank slate, and we had some really good nights, and then we had some not so good nights, so there is something to be said about having a little bit of a skeleton laid out as preparation. Now with modular and hardware, I definitely find movement within my patterns. So I tend to try to make a bunch of patterns and different things, and then I just sort of start blending and making changes to those throughout the set, and just kind of manipulating and moving through them between my hardware and the Eurorack. And I have to say, to the secret weapon, currently my secret weapon and my favorite module right now is the WMD Metron. I absolutely love it. I love the immediacy of being able to just see the layout, be able to change and sequence, shorten the length. It gives me that ability to have the comfort of, hey, I have these patterns. So, if I have that moment of stage fright or whatever, where you're just kind of not in it for the moment, I have some good stuff written. And then once I get into it, it allows me to be able to manipulate those patterns and move around and change things. And so each time I play those things, it doesn't sound the same, so every time I've played a set, even if I play the same songs per se, they don't sound the same. And I like that aspect for sure. One of the things I kind of want to talk about then, when you said about linking, which can be like a nightmare sometimes if and let's talk about that. And Ed, I think that's a perfect place for you to kind of just jump in and really fill us in on your secret weapon here.
Yeah, excellent segue. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we can.
Good.
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me good?
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah. So a little bit about me first. I also come from a performance background. I was in a band for like 10 years or so that played live electronic dance music, but with live instruments. And yeah, I've learned a lot of these lessons we've been talking about, like bringing too much gear to a show and learning how to whittle it down to what you need. But along the way, I've learned a lot about performance and like the things that I would want. And when I started to get into interested in like modular synthesizers, I didn't even have any, but some of my friends did. I was kind of modular adjacent, and one of the things I saw was sync. People have a real problem kind of getting together to jam because your syncing setup, the way you have everything set up, it might not be easy to patch a clock to the next person, or maybe they need a different pulse per quarter note, and you're going at 24 and they only need 4. So then there are just a lot of things that happen, and so I kind of like tucked that away in my head, and then Ableton Link came out and was released for Linux, and a friend of mine, Nick, and I, we kind of came up with this idea for making a modular clock that had Ableton Link in it, so you can wirelessly synchronize iOS to modular, but also modular to modular without having to run a patch cable. So I should have one handy. Hang on one sec.
All right, weren't we just talking about this in the earlier? I feel like this was something that was discussed in the earlier panel.
Sorry.
Maybe I think I mentioned it before we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, someone was just talking about syncing and how it would be nice to have a module with Ableton Link built into it.
So this is my first product here, the missing link. And
there it is.
Yeah.
So it's
Hashtag
a
sponsored post.
So it's a desktop unit. It's not a Eurorack module, but it has 5-volt outputs on the back with one for clock and one for reset. So the clock can be set to whatever pulse size you need, and then the reset pulses every loop that you've set. So you can set it to a 4-beat loop or 16, whatever you need, and it'll tell your sequencer to go back to 0 in case you accidentally. It's a nice safety net if you fall out of sync for some reason, accidentally start and stop your sequencer. It'll be back in sync on the next loop around. And it also has USB, so you can plug in an adapter into here and plug any class compliant USB MIDI interface, and now you have MIDI Clock. So you can plug this directly into any of the newer Electron devices directly. So you just run a USB cable into like a model cycles or model samples or like any of the digis, and then now it'll send MIDI Clock to that. So it's kind of like a little upgrade box to add Ableton Link to a bunch of class compliant sequencers. And the next product, which is still kind of it's in the works, but I can show you. It's sitting on my desk right here. The little 2 HP guy right here. That's my latest prototype of a Eurorack version.
Nice.
This one runs on Raspberry Pi, Pi Zero, and it was a good way to kind of get started with this. Really easy to develop on, but it's not easy to put one of these into a Eurorack format, and it's kind of slow to boot. So compared to Eurorack, you expect it to turn on and be ready in a couple seconds, and this takes 10 to 20 seconds to boot. So the new one is on the ESP32 chip, which has got built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So it's made for Internet of Things kind of stuff. So perfect for this application. And basically the end of last year, I reached out to Ableton and said I was thinking about using the ESP32, and they told me about another person, a couple of people that were working on it as well, and kind of all combined forces, and now they're officially supporting it as a kind of still sort of experimental, but it works pretty well. So so Eurorack version should be hopefully around September-ish. We'll see. Things are slowed down a little bit with all the COVID, but
I'm looking forward to it because I mean I've been using the little one. I like that you added the offset too. That I found that to be really helpful.
Yeah.
So able to change the offset.
So kind of from all my performing and stuff, there's a really large display because one thing when you want to see the tempo, you want to be able to see from far away because you're probably moving around with a lot of stuff. So I like a big display. The irony being on this 2 HP one, there's no display, but that's a different design thinking. But yeah, so one of the features on it is it has an offset. So if there is a bit of latency or things aren't quite lined up, you can just go either forwards or backwards in time and line it up, kind of like in Ableton Live. There's each track can have offsets. Same idea.
I'm
So,
gonna kind of pull it up here on the screen while you're talking about it.
yeah, and yeah, so some of the other things you can do with Ableton Link is there's something called StartStop Sync, and so you can have multiple link devices. When you hit play on one, the others will start or stop together. So it's kind of like it's like Link is funny because like most people are used to like you have like one master clock and then a bunch of stuff that follow that, whereas Link is kind of a layer on top of that. It's like this box is a master for whatever it's plugged into, but then it shares tempo and timing information with other devices in a communal way, like they call it peers. And so you have these kind of two layers with it. So if I change tempo on this box, anything else that's linked up with it will also change tempo. So it's very powerful. And yeah, so with StartStop Sync, I can hit play on this one box, and then anything else that's listening to that will start playing at the same time. So you can, like, what my thinking with like having a really small one is for people in the studio, they just want to have the clock, and then they can just leave StartStop Sync on, and then when you're in your DAW, you just hit record, and the clock starts happening right away when the transport starts. So it becomes this nice wireless remote control for your modular to record with.
Yeah, like I said, it's been really handy for me, and I'm looking forward to the module, the Eurorack version for sure.
Cool.
That's amazing.
Droid. Devon, can you hear us okay?
Work laptop that's on its last couple legs, but looks like I can join you now.
Sweet.
One of the things that we had a question actually in the chat a little earlier, and which I think is pretty important, and it just talks about what we put in our bag, our gig bag. Let's kind of talk about that, like just being prepared. Like, for example, Marika says, as a bass player, my gig bag contains fuses, ground lifts, multi-tool, extra string, extra cables, batteries, and a DI box. What does each one's Eurorack bag contain?
Patch cables.
Yeah.
Mults.
Kind of a given.
Patch cables, mults,
Right.
different methods to connect your modular to different systems.
Right, like
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Bunch of adapters. Tuner. Tuner is like a must. That's what someone needs to make, is like a little pocket tuner that's made for Eurorack levels, because I have to use an attenuator on a guitar tuner in order to get it to even come close to working. So, yeah.
anything else? Devon, what do you?
Console tape or masking tape and a Sharpie. Yeah, let's see. Masking tape and a Sharpie. Maybe actually like a red Sharpie and a black Sharpie in case I need to, write down two different types of information. And sometimes the lighting is weird and red doesn't work. What else? Usually like a notepad with my set list on it. And then of course, like as was mentioned, every possible way you could connect up to a sound system, and very, very long stereo 1/4-inch cables, an extension cord just in case. Yeah. The usual. Yeah. Masking tape, marker, cables, extension cord. I think that's the main thing. Yeah.
Notebook, definitely. Also my headlamp. I very much enjoy wearing my little miner's headlamp while I'm playing live, and that usually helps clear up some of the visibility issues. And then it's going to sound ridiculous, but backup, like backup instruments or backup controllers. I've had issues with controllers or something failing or something not working is intended, and we have to pivot. It's part of your plan B, right? So I always have a plan B with me, and sometimes it's my A plan too. But I do like using like DIY drum kits and stuff like that. And I have a little thing that I've built that is kind of fun. And this one is a big one. This probably does not go in my to-go kit, but I have a small one that goes in my to-go kit. And I pull that out and I can plug that in pretty easily. It's not powered, it's passive. So having that at my disposal to kind of improvise on certainly helps if there's an issue with the set, which inevitably there always is.
Nasty Nachos in the group mentioned the Noise Engineering 4 HP tuner, and I believe I'm going to pull it up actually. It's the Solo Vero, and I'll share it with the screen. Okay. And that's a handy tuner.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have checked that out at all, but that's what he's referring to as this 4 HP tuner.
I've come close a few times, but I know it's crazy. I cannot spare 4 HP in my case.
It's not really crazy.
Someone in the chat actually said a clock, which is actually a really like a stopwatch or something, because sometimes you're playing and you're like, oh, I've been playing so long, this is such a boring set, and you stop and then someone's like, oh, that was really good, but it was only like 10 minutes, or you're just like, oh, this is great, and then you realize you were like playing like one drone loop for like 40 minutes and everyone's falling asleep in the audience. So a clock is definitely a good
it is a great point. I've done it before, but then I forget to look at it. You know, it's like when you're in the heat of it, it's just, you got to look at it. I actually have one built into my sequencer now. There's a clock on the sequencer. So like if I start it and it continues throughout the entire set, then I know how long I've played for. So
I always forget to turn on my stopwatch and press record without it.
Yeah.
Times out of 100.
The sets are always way better.
Signature, Sal at the Robot signature, if you will.
Exactly.
And I was gonna actually go into the whole, and I just lost my train of thought. My apologies.
And always double check that you have everything. I mean, I've gone to shows and I've like know that I have everything, and I'll stop and pull over and look in my back seat and be like, okay, cool, I brought the power supply. Like I'll open my backpack just to make sure that I brought that power supply. Just weird things like that.
Yeah, I started making a checklist actually, like, and even if I have done it 100 times, I still go through the checklist for that same reason, because man, I've forgotten the stupidest things. You know, like you bring everything, but you don't bring a power cable to
Exactly.
You know, so
Exactly.
yeah.
I've got a question for everyone. I think such an important part of the live experience, and certainly with Eurorack, is having a really good mixer. I think that's critical. And it took me a long time, A, to realize that, and B, to find one that works for me. I use a Tesseract modular little mixing system. They call it the Tex Mix or something like that. It's really cool and small and has sliders, which I appreciate. But what do y'all use for a mixer when you play live in the case?
In the case, I use the WMD, the 10-channel monster one. That's awesome.
Someone else who uses that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the extra channel expander. Yeah.
Yes.
And the mutes.
I have the mutes, but I did not put them in the case yet. But yes.
Yeah, I find myself using them less now, but it's still handy. Like, it's real nice to have those mutes, you know. Yeah.
I think another good mixer is the Bafako with the hex mix. The
Hex mix.
That's a really both of those mixers. I've used both of them, and I really like them. I like that it has like the stackable 3-band EQ, and then it has the 3 send and return channels that way too. So they're both great, in my opinion, in my experience. I like those.
Yeah, that's a good one. My first performances, I didn't use. I was using like just 4. One of those 4-channel VCAs that also has mixing in them built into the module, and I didn't have any send returns or anything like that. And I just realized how much harder I was working by not using the proper tools, and getting a mixer really helped me with that personally.
If we're talking about Eurorack, it's Eurorack. You can build all of that stuff, but the question is, with modules, you can patch it. The question is do you want to make that same patch every time? Or I suppose you could just leave it patched permanently, but having a specific dedicated mixer, I mean, that is a huge part of performing on a modular live, is how you mix things. That's massive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts with using mixers outside the box? Like occasionally I have like the mixer in the box, but then I'll route into a DJ mixer to kind of get that feel with my hardware. How's that? Like whether it's like a studio style mixer, like a Mackie or Allen and Heath or something.
Well, I know Jason's opinion on it.
Yeah. It's a hard no. Yeah, I mean, in my studio, fine, but yeah, no, not a chance. I mean, for a little while, I was looking for an external mixer that took DB25 cables, because I was thinking to myself, if I could patch into a module like the Snake Charmer or the NW2S IO and come out of that on DB25 to a DJ style mixer, then I can show up, plug in one cable, and I'd be good. But like to patch in all those cables from your case into the mixer at a show, that just, I don't know, that just sounds like a big headache to me. Like sounds rough. Yeah.
I definitely prefer like an actual like desktop mixer for they're larger.
Yeah.
I find I love Eurorack, but at the same time it's very fiddly, and like finding I don't know, just like having bigger faders and easy send knobs to grab. Like I definitely prefer something like that. That's kind of like what I was used to doing, like pre getting into modular too, though.
Yeah.
Rhythm. Go ahead, Trevor.
Oh, I was just gonna say another option too is matrix mixers, like the 4MS VCA matrix or something. Like you can do all of this stuff that like send and return, but then you have more options to do like weird feedback stuff too. Usually you only get like 4 channels, but it can be a fun setup if you don't have a lot of inputs. So
we have a question. Are you all playing Eurorack, or are you using hardware to any computer integration? By Nasty Nachos. Who wants to take it?
Sound like
I do all of that. And like to a default, like I feel like sometimes I don't play with the same setup more than one time and consecutively in a row, which can be a fun thing, keeps me on my toes, but also it has its downsides too. I'll just say that. Anyone else? Well, anyone else?
No computer for me, but I do use other hardware as covered. I just got a Soma Pulsar 23, and I've used that live ever since I got one, and it's been a huge inspiration for me. It's like a total revelation. So I've been using it on our live streams, since we obviously haven't been performing in person. But that thing is it's a godsend.
It's a beast.
Yep. Yeah, maybe it's a Satan send.
Yeah, I think so.
And Jonathan and Jason, speaking of live performances now in this time, like, why don't you talk about the show you guys are having tonight? Because it sounds pretty dope.
Oh yeah, we're after hours for the Synth Society Summit is happening on Twitch on the New York Modular Society channel, starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I guess that's 7 p.m. Pacific. We've got, I think it's, are we going 3 hours tonight?
Yeah, we've got 6 acts, 3 hours.
6 acts.
Link in the chat.
Yeah.
I will do that right now. Everyone should show up just to see Jason perform. It's fucking awesome.
Look, I started this patch yesterday late. So I haven't had much time.
I hate when you say that. Last week, it was like 4 o'clock. It was like 3 hours before we were all going to start playing. He's like, I haven't even started yet. And then he shows up on the stream and he fucking smokes all of us. It was unreal. I hate when you say that.
Oh, man. Well, thank you. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Now, there's also another statement in the chat by Nasty Nachos, and it's great because everybody here has a different approach. So in just like a minute each, like, what is the different philosophies? He says everyone seems to have a different philosophy, so he's interested to hear about that. So just live performance, strictly in the box, strictly out, specific hardware, too much hardware. Like, what's your philosophy? I know you like that. I'm throwing it all at you guys right now. Devin, I think you kind of touched on it earlier. I see like how you play, and it's very, you've dialed in. It seems that you've really dialed in your setup.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've just kind of narrowed the setup more and more. I mean, my goal is to create something that's funky and electronic, and it's got new sounds and non-mainstream sounds, but at the same time, I really want to make sure that I can sort of slide in between 2 different DJ sets, and the average Joe or Jane off the street wouldn't really know the difference. I mean, of course, I would love them to enjoy my music, and if they saw that I was performing live, that'd be great. But I'm trying to sort of fit in a club environment. That's the way I do things. But so that's one hand. I have that goal of wanting to fit in a dance club environment. But then on the other hand, I'm not going to bring out. I think I've tried playing with an octatrack once or twice, and it was like, nah, this is just, I don't want to get this fiddly and this finicky with such, it's so easy when you're working with large audio loops to just misfire something and mistrigger something. So I'm trying to work with, somewhat granular elements like, drum patterns, and then bass lines, lead lines, chords, things like that. So it's basically, on one hand, it's like there's the need to be, somewhat commercially viable. And then on the other hand, it's that I want to be able to improvise, and I want to be able to explore new sounds and new textures, but still maintain a certain DJ type feel. And, this particular combination of Electron hardware has really worked for me. I think the next thing that I might possibly think about integrating is a Pioneer DJS 1000, which is essentially like a loop sampler, but very, very stage oriented and very sort of like brain dead in terms of it's hard to mess up with it on stage, but you still have some flexibility and some creativity. Does that answer your question?
Yes. What about you, Jonathan?
I don't know. I guess my philosophy for playing live is sort of the answer here, but I guess just don't be afraid of failure, right? Like for me, that was such a huge barrier, was
Very nice.
Not letting myself not giving myself the chance to succeed because I was too busy worrying about what could go wrong, right? And the first time you play, once something does fucking go wrong, and it will, it passes and then everything is okay again. And B, you'll obsess over it, but no one notices. So it's okay. Like I can't tell you how many times I've said to Jason, like, "Oh shit, didn't you even realize how badly?" He's like, "It doesn't stop it," you know. And that's that. So like, get over that mental hurdle. I think playing in a band is really rewarding, especially as electronic music. It creates its own challenges, but it's really, really, really fun to get to share the stage with, you know, your best friend or your brother or whoever you decide to play with, and just get weird with it. Like, again, if you're not afraid of failing, then you're not going to be afraid of experimenting and trying new things and seeing what you can make of your time.
Yes, love that.
Sean, what is your
my philosophy for playing is I just use whatever I want to use at that particular time. I'll dig through whatever in the box, out of the box. I usually always use a computer. So I'm whatever I need to use to make it happen is you know, get people into it and just tell my story is what I choose. So that's my kind of background and what I do with it.
Trevor, how about you?
Yeah, I guess it's just like use the fact that you've got a show book to like come up with try to come up with a new set and then like practice it, but don't practice it so much that it feels like you're just like step A, step B, step C, that it's kind of like feels alive. So yeah, I guess that's the thing. Just it's a good opportunity to like come up with a new thing instead of doing something you're already familiar with.
Totally.
I'm gonna smash Trevor, and sorry, I just jumped in, Traversy. I figured you were going to me next. I'm sorry. I'm gonna smash what Trevor and John said together a little bit here. I don't use a computer. Nothing against it. I think that they're great. Just when I play live, I really enjoy using the modular a lot, mostly because it is kind of dangerous in that way that something can go wrong. And when it does, because it will, no matter what, something will go wrong every set without failure. Just repeat that thing that you did wrong again, and then again, and then it becomes music, and then nobody will notice it at all because they'll think it's planned. I mean, even if the music stops, start back up, then stop it. You know, like just do that a couple times and you're good to go. But I don't know. Philosophically speaking, I like keeping it all in the box. I like being able to improvise a bit. I really like abstract music a lot, but I also really like tonal stuff that's on the grid, pop music, you know. So I kind of try to find a happy balance between those things and give something for people to space out on, like they're looking at some weird expressionist painting in a museum, you know, but then give them something to ground them a little bit too. You know, I like bringing those two elements a lot together. Yeah.
Nice.
It's better. Yeah.
Ed, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't get out to perform too much anymore. So when I do, it's really specific, and yeah, it depends on what it's going to be. If I'm playing with a trumpet player and a drummer or something, then, you know, I'm going to bring so whatever tools I need, I guess. But these days I'm doing a lot of in the studio stuff, but I still try to keep that performance vibe. And so usually I perform with, you know, another friend. I'll bring somebody in and I'll have an idea sketched out in Ableton Live, and then we'll perform live over it. And then I'll cut up loops and things, or maybe the take is great how it is and just needs a couple of little edits or something. But that's kind of my philosophy these days. As far as my acts these days, it's electron model samples for drums, and then I have a fairly modest modular still, and so I basically have a decent mono voice with enough modulation and ways to do stuff to keep it interesting and evolving. So yeah, kind of the computer has become like a tape recorder, but then kind of I go in there and I produce on top of it, and so it becomes kind of the post-production for me.
Nice. All right, guys.
Awesome.
I want to say thank you all so much for participating in the panel and putting in your thoughts and input. I thought it was great. We got a lot of good comments out there. I want to tell everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. We have more for you. Next live is actually launching right now on the channel, Southern California Synth Society. We will be talking about sequencing with modular and outside of the rack. So yes, and also another reminder to please this evening, if you want to hear some live sets and performances, be sure to tune in to Twitch. Did you guys get a chance to drop that link in the chat for everyone?
We did. Yep.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And yeah, so thank you. And we have more for you tonight and tomorrow. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.